Good morning. I guess I should say good afternoon. My name is Mary Thornley. I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming you to this very special session, Journeying Through the Stars with three incredible gentlemen. Are you ready to meet them? Yes. All right. Are you ready to meet them? Yes. Thank you. First of all, before you meet them, we have to give some thank yous for this session. We want to thank some sponsors. Christopher Randolph, thank you so much. Sarah Beardsley, the sister of Scooter Altman. And Nicole Rubin, my daughter. Now, would you join me and let's give a very special welcome to Meminger Elementary School has 41 fifth graders here. Let's welcome the fifth graders. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And another special thanks to Ted and Elizabeth Dintersmith for offsetting the cost of the school field trips. And the Good Neighbor Fund, go ahead. Yes, thank you. Thank you. And the Good Neighbor Fund for providing books for visiting students. Now, 2 points of housekeeping. Make sure your phone is silenced. And these impressive gentlemen will be available to sign books right after this session in the signing lounge. All right, so let me just tell you this for starters. What I'd really like to do is to hand you a 50-page bio for every one of these gentlemen and say skim it, and then we'll start. But that's not what they want me to do. So instead, with limited words, I'm going to introduce to you these three amazing men. First of all, the moderator, Scooter Altman. He is a retired United States Navy captain and naval aviator and engineer, test pilot, and astronaut. He flew in space 4 times and commanded 2 of those missions. An accomplished fighter pilot, he has earned many honors which I won't list. Now, I will tell you this. He is very well known for his unforgettable aerial acrobatic fights in the 1986 hit movie Top Gun. Did you see it? All right. That was not Tom Cruise up there, that was him. And now Les Johnson, a space scientist. Les Johnson. He is a physicist, author, and NASA technologist. He is an elected member of the International Academy of Astronautics, a fellow of the British Interplanetary Society, and a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, the National Space Society, as well as Mensa. In his day job, he leads listen to this, if I can get through it. He leads the development of advanced in-space spacecraft propulsion technologies at the NASA George Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. He is leading many of NASA's efforts to develop solar cell propulsion for interplanetary and future interstellar travel. During his career at NASA, he served as the manager for the Space Science Programs and Projects Office, the In-Space Propulsion Technology Project, and the Interstellar Propulsion Research Project. Yes, he did. Today, he will discuss his book, Pluto. It is a science fiction novel, the third in a series of the Outer Planets trilogy. Next, we have Charles F. Bolden, Jr. He is a retired U.S. Marine Corps Major General, an astronaut, and a former NASA administrator. And he's one of ours. He grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. He graduated from C.A. Johnson High School in Columbia, and then in 1968, he again graduated, this time from the U.S. Naval Academy. As a Marine pilot, he has flown more than 100 combat missions during the Vietnam War. Selected as a NASA astronaut in 1980, he flew 4 space shuttle missions, including commanding the Space Shuttle Discovery. In the year 2009, President Obama appointed him the 12th administrator of NASA, making him the first African American to hold that position. After retiring from NASA, he became active in education, STEM advocacy, and leadership consulting. In his book, Star Sailor, he offers us a thrilling account of his own shuttle missions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, just because he's a South Carolinian, if you know Charles Bolden, or if you are related to him, would you do this? Would you do this? Would you do that? Would you do that? Thank you so much. Charles Bolden, Les Johnson, and Scooter Altman. Thank you.
Well, thank you for such a great introduction for this talk, and I'm really looking forward to having it. A couple of my favorite people here, even though I just met Les, I've really enjoyed reading his work, and Charlie I've known for quite a long time, and actually I have different ideas of what I'm going to ask about based on that introduction there. So, but Charlie, in talking to you about growing up in Columbia, and didn't you come here to Charleston while you were in high school?
I did. My senior year in high school, I was a football player, believe it or not, and my father was my high school football coach. But we had won the upper state football championship, and Burke High School was the lower state champion. So on the 22nd of, some of the more mature people in here will remember the date, but on the 22nd of November, we traveled from Columbia to Charleston to play Burke for the state championship. And we learned on the way down here that President Kennedy had been assassinated. So they discussed perhaps not playing the game, but they decided we'd play it anyway. The bands played the national anthem, and then that was it for the pageantry and everything. We played and we beat Burke, as we were supposed to, and got on the bus and went back home. So it was a dark, dark day in my life for a number of reasons.
But a day none of us will ever forget going through back then. Even I was somewhat smaller than you at the time, but I still remember that as well. Les, what drew you? I knew what drew you to NASA growing up. What drew you to writing?
When I was in elementary school, I discovered science fiction. And once I started reading science fiction, oh my gosh, my sister would still talk about this today. I was reading like a novel a week at high school level by about that time. And I just, as I got into my career, I had the opportunity to write co-author a nonfiction book about space exploration with a fellow who'd been a published author. And that book came out, and I was at, believe it or not, a science fiction convention. Have you ever heard of these? And I get invited to give talks about space and science, and no, I don't wear Spock ears, just to put that to rest. And while I was there, I was having a discussion with a fellow who had just had his first science fiction novel published. And we were actually kind of bashing the NASA Public Relations Office. And we were doing that because what you guys got on the shuttle, I mean, you would hear a little bit of snippets, but space is the most dangerous environment out there. It's going to try to kill you at every turn, right? And we were comparing space exploration to Jack London's book, The Call of the Wild. Only it's much worse, right, than being in the Alaska wilderness. And it turns out his publisher was in the booth next to us at the restaurant we were sitting in. And she got up and said, if you give me a fiction book proposal that tells in fiction a modern, updated version of The Call of the Wild, but in space, I'll publish it.
Wow.
So we put together a book proposal and an outline, and it became my first fictional novel called Back to the Moon.
Wow. That's the way to start as an author, with a book deal already.
Right out of it. It was in a barbecue place that we were
I need to know where that barbecue place is if I ever try to do a book. So Charlie, coming back to you and growing up in this area, how did your experiences here growing up influence your determination and resilience to move through your career, do you think?
I was blessed to have parents who were school teachers. So my mom and dad were school teachers. They had both grown up in Columbia, and then they both went together to Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte, North Carolina, came back to Columbia. My mother was a librarian, and she founded the first library for black students in Columbia, South Carolina at Waverly Elementary School, and then went on to junior high and then became the first black librarian to move into formerly all-white schools when the schools were integrated in the 70s. My dad was my high school football coach, as I mentioned, and I tell people all the time, everything I needed to know about ethics and just how you live your life, I learned at my dinner table from my mom and dad. And they told my brother and me that we could do anything that we wanted to do as long as we were willing to work really hard and study. And I forgot it once, and I can tell you about that later. But I was driven to do things that many people would have thought you don't do, just because back then little black kids didn't do that. And so for a lot of the students sitting over here, take my mom and dad's advice. You can do anything you want to do, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Well, the amazing thing is how much that resonates with me, because Sarah and my parents were both school teachers, and they told me the same thing. You can be anything you want as long as you remember 3 things. Work hard, do your best, and never give up on your dreams. So yeah, I appreciate that. I do have a couple of things. As a fighter pilot, you chose
Now remember, I'm not a fighter pilot.
You chose...
I'm an attack pilot. I wear a small watch. Look at Scooter's watch. the difference.
I was getting ready to roll in on
I know.
guys here. So why'd you pick the
A6 intruder
A6 over the F4? You could have been a Phantom guy.
No, I always liked numbers, and I am a people person, so I really wanted to do something that would put me in an as you know, with a crewed aircraft,
right.
It would put me in an aircraft with someone else that I could work as a team. When I was going through flight school, the weatherman, the meteorology professor, always talked about this aircraft called the A6 Intruder that was then and remains, although we don't have it anymore, but it's the only truly all-weather attack aircraft that any nation has ever had. All we needed to do was be able to see enough runway to take off and enough runway to land, and you did the rest of the mission on the system that was in the airplane. And I fell in love with it and decided that's what I wanted to fly.
Now, the F4 was also a 2-person cockpit, but the advantage the A6 had over that is you could reach over and hit the guy next to you.
That's right, we were side by side.
In the F-14 and the F4, it's pretty hard to hit the back cockpit. So Les, when we were talking backstage, you mentioned some of your favorite authors, but I noticed you hit some of the classics, Asimov, Heinlein. You didn't mention Ray Bradbury.
Well, yeah, I didn't really read that much Ray Bradbury. He was not one of my favorite science fiction writers. And I don't know how to explain that, except different writing styles appeal to different people. But I was very much drawn to the optimism of the future that came from the classic science fiction writers. And that's what I've tried to emulate in my work. And Bradbury was a great writer, no doubt about it, but his writing style just wasn't one I resonated with.
Well, growing up in Illinois, a lot of his stories take place in the Midwest, Illinois kind of background, so I think maybe that's what drove me to him. But and then, how'd you meet Ben Bova and get connected with him?
Now, Ben Bova, for those of you not familiar with the science fiction genre, Ben was one of the great writers when I was in high school. And there was Asimov, Clark, Heinlein, Bradbury were kind of the first tier. He was one of those writers in the next tier. He was writing bestseller after bestseller, editing some of the leading science fiction short story magazines. And I started reading him in high school, his stuff. I thought it was great. And I read him throughout my adult life and had the opportunity in 1996, after I'd been working in Huntsville, where I took my first job after grad school. I was in a local professional society, and we were having a conference, and I was responsible for the keynote speech.
Oh.
So I thought, why not get one of the great science fiction writers to come? So I invited Ben. He came to our house. We had dinner with him. He autographed, of course, copies of his books. And then about 10 years later, my publisher, the one that heard us in the booth, said that Ben Bova had reached out to her and wanted to know if I would consider writing a novel with him. He had been reading my books. And of course, after I got up off the floor, because he was one of the great writers I greatly admired, we wrote a book called Rescue Mode. And it did well. It was a Mars mission story. And then our paths crossed a few times, but unfortunately he passed during COVID. And after he died, I received a note from his wife saying, "Hey Les, Ben really liked your work. Would you consider finishing Ben's last novel?" And that's the book Pluto that you see here. He had not left an outline. He had not told me how he wanted to complete the book. I had 8,000 words to begin with, which is like a chapter and a half to 2 chapters. which introduced two of the main characters, which I kept. But I had to take it from there, and I was completely on my own. So I went back and reread several of Ben's books to try to get the voice and the tenor. And he actually wrote a book called How to Write Science Fiction. And I found a used copy of it, and I thought, well, I better read this to get in his mind before I finish his last novel, because no matter what I do, the diehard Ben Bova fans are going to realize this wasn't Ben, right? And so I'm hoping that they don't skewer me too much in the reviews. But I think everything I've heard so far from most people, though, has been very positive, that they've enjoyed it. But that's how I met Ben. And he was a great man. He was a mentor for me on that book in 2014. Just a kindly person. And his family's been very kind to me as well.
Yeah, now, you also, along those lines, as we were talking, and I read about this about you, the idea of plotting things out, or a pantser. Can you explain the difference between a plotter and a pantser?
I sure can. Working for NASA, you have to have a plan for everything, right? So, and you can ask my wife, who's in the audience. I'm kind of a planner. For this trip, we have the flights and the Tripit app, and we know exactly where to be when. And so when I write a novel, I kind of know how it's going to end. I outline the characters. I kind of get the story arc that I want to have. So I have an outline to follow. When I started writing with Ben, first thing I did is I said, okay, Ben, where do you want this book to go, the one we wrote in 2014? And he said, oh, I don't know. And I said, what do you mean you don't know? He goes, well, I have this idea about a Mars mission, but something goes wrong. And I said, okay, and do you want to create an outline of what your vision is? And he goes, no, I'm what's called a pantser. He writes by the seat of his pants. And he said, I don't want you to outline anything. I want you to take the characters that I've created, he created the characters in that book, and just start writing. And then when you've got 40,000 words, which is a lot, send it to me and I'll tell you what I think. Okay? So it really, I wasn't surprised when I found out after he passed for Pluto that there was no outline.
No outline, no plot.
And there was no, I want to end it with this,
yeah.
Right? Because he was apparently just telling a story. And so I immediately outlined how I wanted to end it and started writing.
Well, I don't want to give away the whole story because I understand a lot of the students here got the book and people are going to buy it, but I will tell you, I got an advance. It's just now coming out for purchase. Great story. I wanted to know how it ends, but I would have to say, I don't think it quite ended yet because there's a lot of questions still out there in the book, but I'm not going to give it away, go no further. Read the book, find out, see what you think, how it ends, and send questions to him on what you think should happen next.
I just want to put one plug in. The story arc of the characters does end.
That's fair.
But I wanted to have an ending that gives you this sense of wonder and unknown about the universe. And that was what I strove for because I think, as Charlie will attest and you know, there's so much out there we don't know.
Right.
And I strove at the end of the book to convey that sense of wonder and unknown.
And that kind of takes me back to the Hubble Space Telescope, which Charlie was part of the team that put that on orbit. And one of the things I have to say is thank you for deploying a defective telescope to give me something to do on my last two missions to go up there and fix it. So when you were planning that mission, did you feel like you as the commander, or when you were the commander, or on that mission as the PLT, did you feel like you were a pantser or a plotter?
With Bruce McCandless and Kathy Sullivan as crew members, for those of you who may not know them or know of them, you're definitely a planner.
Yeah.
Whether you want to be or not, because they were the two spacewalk crew members for the Hubble mission. We didn't know what might happen, and as Les says, NASA plans for everything. So we planned every contingency. As Scooter knows, having flown 2 or 3 of the servicing missions, we have a tool, an individual tool for everything that could possibly happen. So gazillion tools for the possible work that you may have to do on Hubble. And Kathy and Bruce played an intimate role in the design and development of every one of those tools. And I was what they call the intravehicular crew member, the inside the cabin person for a spacewalk. So I got to watch them do their thing, and I became a planner by default.
Yep.
I think I'm a pantser by nature.
By nature?
But
right.
It shows you can adapt.
Yeah. Now, in reading the book, it's kind of an interesting story that Bruce and Kathy were very instrumental in the deployment and understanding the telescope, But where were they when that actually deployed?
Kathy has never forgiven me. As I mentioned, they were the spacewalk crew members. Our deploy day, and for those of you in the audience, deploy means you're going to put something out there. So we lifted Hubble out of the payload bay of the space shuttle, held it up until it got checked out, and then just released it with a mechanical arm, or robotic arm, and we flew away from it. It didn't fly away from us. Nothing worked right on our deploy day. It took us forever to get it up out of the payload bay because the arm, this was the first, well, maybe the first time we had carried something that heavy. It started moving around and it wasn't supposed to do that. So Steve Hawley, my crew member who was actually operating the arm, had to move joint by joint. The arm is like a human arm. And so rather than just pulling back on a stick and lifting it out, he had to adjust each joint, move it a little bit, adjust another joint, move it out. And then when we got it out, the first solar array, which provides the power for it, went out without a problem. Second solar array went maybe 16 inches and stopped. And we spent most of the day trying to figure out, what's wrong and how do we fix that. And as the day wore on, the ground said, hey, put Kathy and Bruce in the airlock and get them ready to go out because we may have to manually deploy the solar array to save Hubble. And so I was the crew member that went down, suited them up, put them in the airlock, and we evacuate this. We have a little compartment called an airlock, and you take all the air out of it so that they're literally in space inside the spacecraft so that when they open the outer hatch, they can go right out into space. And we had them almost down when the ground called up and said, stop, stop, stop. We think we know what's wrong. And so they said, we want you to maneuver into the deploy attitude, let Hubble go because it's about to die. It was on battery power and that was about to run out and we would have lost the telescope. So we rapidly maneuvered into the deploy position. I had to go upstairs. That left 3 of us on the flight deck now doing 5 people's work because we wanted to photo document and everything, and we got it deployed. Bruce and Kathy were in the airlock with a little bitty window about this size that let them look out into the payload bay. They couldn't even see Hubble, and all of their work, years of work, they did not get to see it at all because they were in the airlock, suited to go out and do an emergency rescue of Hubble.
Yeah.
And Kathy has never forgiven me for leaving them locked up in the airlock.
But you let them out eventually.
We let them out eventually. They came out.
Because there's not a lot of room in that airlock with 2 people in there, full in suits
at all.
and stuff. Getting to a window to be able to see anything is pretty much impossible. Yeah. We did, on my missions, we did 5 straight days of spacewalks. You talked about having a tool for everything, but we had one spacewalk where we could not get this bar off a box, and they mocked it up at Goddard Space Flight Center and said, okay, this bar, the handle, you're going to have to break it off manually to get it to come off. And they said it's going to take 60 pounds of force to do that. And we gave Mike Massimino a go to break it off. And I was worried he was going to break it and hit himself in the head and break his visor or something. But everything went fine. But it was just an example of you get all the way down your contingency procedures and you've got nothing left but your imagination and you work with the ground to figure it out. So it works that way. So Les, in writing the book Pluto, what character did you identify most with?
Wow. Oddly enough, I probably identified most with the character I wrote that had become a human machine.
Interesting. I wondered about that.
Yeah. And it was the reason I don't say I identified with him. I felt a lot of empathy for him.
Yeah.
Not that I could see that being me, but I felt empathy for him because he was. At first, you think this character has got malevolent or evil intent. And then you come to realize, no, he's just different and views things differently because of what's happened to him due to a catastrophe that happened before he came on this mission. And I enjoyed very much the evolution of people understanding him.
Yes.
Okay, because they start out with one view, and through events you come to realize, no, he's still not the most likable person in the world, but there are reasons that you uncovered throughout the book.
Yeah, I think that was very interesting the way that played out. Makes me wonder about the future because AI is becoming so much a part of our life. I know My sister was just telling me she wrote a short story and then input it into ChatGPT, and she felt ChatGPT put something out better than what she wrote. And I'm like, whoa, I don't believe that.
Authors don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
No.
So, Charlie, what made you decide to write this book?
Oh, geez. I have 5 grandchildren. My son has 3 girls, and they're grown. 2 college graduates. One is a sophomore at Penn State now. And my daughter has 2 little boys who are 2 and 4. But none of them were alive when I was an active astronaut. So I started out like 20 some odd years ago, deciding I was going to write a book to tell the story of what my experience as an astronaut was for my 3 granddaughters. And if you get the book, you'll see there's a picture of them up in the front because the book is dedicated to my 5 grandchildren. But I wrote the book to tell them the story of what it was like to be an astronaut, hopefully so that they would understand a little bit of what they had done. My granddaughters have now seen a space launch, but the boys are too young. We've got to get them down to see a launch sometime.
We need to get some more launches going, yeah.
That's right.
Hopefully Artemis launches in February for the next evolution of that. That's great. Now, becoming an astronaut, you made a couple of comments in your book that surprised me a little bit. You said you were intimidated to apply because you thought all astronauts were tall.
Yes.
But the limit was 5'11". I always thought all astronauts were short.
For you.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because there were a number of reasons, not just because they were tall. When you got to remember the era in the country. This was still the you may think because it was the 70s that things had changed a lot. Unfortunately, sometimes the more things change, the more they remain the same. So in growing up here in South Carolina, it was out of reason to think that a young black kid could become an astronaut. So that is one of the things for the kids. Again, don't place artificial limitations on yourself, because that's the story of my childhood life. There were things that I was expected to do or things that I could do. You know, a doctor in my neighborhood in Columbia was a pretty big deal, maybe an attorney, but an astronaut, don't even think about it. I knew what astronauts were, and I admired them, but I never harbored a desire to become an astronaut because it just wasn't going to happen for me. So I didn't even think about it. And then the fact that they all seemed to be tall. They were all white, and they were all military test pilots in the beginning anyway, and I was none of those. So I didn't even think about it. And then what happened was I met another South Carolinian, a guy by the name of I call him the late, great Dr. Ron McNair. Yeah. Ron is from Lake City, South Carolina. He is my hero and my role model. Ron, a few years younger than me, Lake City being not much bigger than this auditorium, Ron's family says he never went a day where he did not believe that he was going to be an astronaut.
Wow.
And Ron applied and was selected in the very first group of space shuttle astronauts. I went on to become a test pilot, and I had an occasion to meet him when he came up to where I was working as a test pilot. And I was mesmerized in talking to him, and talked to him for a whole weekend. When he got ready to go back to Houston, got in his sleek-looking NASA supersonic T-38.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, are you going to apply for the program?" I said, "Ron, not on your life." And he looked at me real strange. He said, "Why not?" I said, "They never picked me." And he paused for a minute. He said, "You know, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard." He said, "How do you know if you don't ask?" And it embarrassed me so much because I had forgotten what we talked about earlier, what my mom and dad told me. And I felt about like that big. And when Ron went back to Houston, I went home and I told my wife, I don't stand a snowball's chance in a place. But I'm going to apply for the astronaut program because I don't want to go through life and look back and say, what if? And so I put my application in, and I got an opportunity to interview, and I was selected in the second group of space shuttle astronauts. So message one more time for the young people over here is ask for anything you want. Nobody's going to walk up to you on the street and say, "Hey, we're looking for an astronaut. Would you like to be one?" Doesn't happen that way.
Well, you made me think of Wayne Gretzky, who had that famous quote, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." the worst thing that happens when you try is they tell you no. And I think one of the things I've found, because I didn't just interview once, I had to go back and interview again. The first time they said, no, Scooter, so I went back to the Navy, but they asked me to apply again, and this time they said yes. And my big lesson to folks is, it's not what happens when somebody tells you no, it's what you do after that, that you can come back and don't give up just because somebody's put a roadblock in front of you.
Yeah, you remind me of my dad. I keep saying my dad was my high school football coach. I'm a very emotional person. I'm like my dad, believe it or not. He's a tough guy. But my dad taught me to cry. And he taught me to cry when we lost a football game.
Yeah.
And he would get us in the locker room and he'd say, hey, how do you feel? And we'd look at him and we'd say, we don't feel really good. He said, that's good. He said, and if you want to cry, go ahead and cry and get it out of you, and then get back in there and do better the next time. So like Scooter says, and we always hear people say this thing, the sign of a true leader and a person is somebody who gets knocked down and then gets back up. Yeah. And that's kind of the story of life. Some of you are moping around now because we're struggling here as a nation. We're not out, you get down and you get back up, and that's who we are. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to shift a little bit into the science and go back to you, Les. So, how does your background as a physicist fit into your writing, and does it prevent you from doing some things? I did notice in the book, people seem to get to Pluto pretty quickly and back, which
my hero, Buck Rogers.
So a few years ago, there was a Magic School Bus episode where Miss Frizzle took her students to Pluto, and I would go out and do a talk, and people would say, well, how far away is Pluto? Yeah. How long would it take you to get there? I'm like, I don't know. We're not doing that. So what does it take us to get to Pluto?
Yeah. Well, you have to, for science fiction, that's different than my nonfiction writing.
Right. That's good, I think.
It is good.
Have that line.
It's a good thing. People at work will tell you that's a good thing. So I wrote a book called A Traveler's Guide to the Stars, where I talk about how we might go to the stars someday. And in there, I spent a lot of time talking about different propulsion technologies that our physics says are possible, but we don't know how to engineer yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, things like fusion propulsion, antimatter-based propulsion. It's too much to go into here, but nature is kind of weird. It's got these things called antiprotons, which look just like a proton, but they have an opposite charge.
Wrong charge.
And when they come into contact with a normal proton, they annihilate, which is a scientific term for they explode, and release all this energy. It's E equals mc squared. If you've heard of that, that's Einstein's equation in reality. Right. There's so much energy there, if we could tap it for propulsion, you get trips to the outer solar system in weeks, okay? So, just amazing acceleration, what you can do with one Earth gravity of acceleration for hours or days. You can go really fast. So I intentionally kind of wave my arms about that in the book because it's not my nonfiction book. But I kept it in the realms of realism in that it should be possible.
Okay.
And this book is set in the future, so I'm assuming that the engineers, just like the ones I work with in my day job, where I said, hey, we're going to build this big thing called a solar sail, and they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm sure future engineers will look at the person who comes up with the antimatter drive a little crazy. So that's what I try to do. I try to keep the fiction to entertain and leave enough in there that people who are interested in the science might go check out something else.
So you still live with the c in there, the speed of light,
Absolutely.
As a limit.
And that's for physics reasons, because we don't think it's possible to travel at the speed of light or faster. I didn't want to break the laws of physics. If you watch the original Star Trek, you know what Scotty always says, Captain, I cannot break the laws of physics, right? So,
but they had warp drive somehow, so they figured that part out.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm waiting for some kid who doesn't pay attention in physics class and figures out, hey, we can do this because I figured this out.
Yeah.
They tell me you can't for all my years. Anyway, that was all great. Charlie, I still have to give you a hard time because you left NASA and went back to the Marines right about the time that they stole NAS Miramar from the Navy.
Oh, jeez.
How did you do that to me?
For those of you who don't know what Scooter is talking about, Miramar is probably one of the premier military air bases in the world. It's awesome. It's
In San Diego.
It's San Diego, where it's 70 degrees year round.
Yeah.
Just beautiful and everything. But because of the way that our Congress works, they decided we needed to reduce the number of bases we had. So they decided they were going to close 2 Marine Corps bases up in Orange County, where I was, and move the Marines down to Miramar and take the Navy and move them to Nevada. Now, if that doesn't confuse you enough.
Yeah, well, yeah,
So-
it was quite a trade.
So we took Fighter Town, USA, for those of you who have seen the Top Gun movies, and we took it away from the Navy and we gave it to the Marine Corps. And so I was the first Marine to go down and command forces at then NAS Miramar, now MCAS,
CAS,
Marine Corps
yes.
Air Station Miramar. So that's what he's talking about. And I don't feel guilty about it at all.
Oh, okay.
Although we really got a hard time from the community because we were bringing helicopters in. And people hate things that they don't understand or they don't know. And not a lot of people in San Diego, other than those that lived around a place called North Island,
North Island, yeah.
were accustomed to helicopter noise or helicopter sounds, other than the police helicopter or something like that. We were bringing in big assault helicopters and troop transport helicopters. And so we decided we were going to be good neighbors and we were going to fly some test flights so that we could determine the best routes to come and go. And we wanted to get reaction from the neighbors, call us and tell us about noise complaints and everything. We scheduled the first flights at 9 o'clock on a particular morning. 9 o'clock, the phone started ringing with complaints. The only problem was it was a really bad morning for weather. We didn't fly. And so as the people taking the phone calls would say, but ma'am, we're not flying. They said, oh, they told us to start calling at 9. That at the end of that first year, we were voted Citizens of the Year by the people in San Diego because of the way that we had encouraged our Marines to get active in the community, go out and be scoutmasters and tutors and mentors and things like that, so they learned what Marines were really like, not what people had told them we were like.
Well, I was worried about that because we would fly out over to the warning area from Miramar to Whiskey 291, it was called, and you had a route of flight that you would go, and it went over La Jolla. And in a jet, you're making some noise, but whoosh, you go by. In an H-53, you're making some noise, you're like,
Big helicopter.
does not whoosh. So, but I'm glad you guys solved that and had a good relationship with the company.
Still do.
Which brings me back, so you're at the Naval Academy, and you're all set to graduate, and instead of picking naval aviation, you went Marines. What drove you that
I'm a
direction?
people person, as I said, and I'm very impressed by people who look like my mom and dad or act like my mom and dad. My very first company officer, the person responsible for about 150 midshipmen, the students at the Naval Academy, was a young Marine by the name of Major John Riley Love, who was just like my dad. He was unbelievably tough, but eminently fair.
Yeah.
And he got me through the roughest year at any military school, which is your plebe year, your freshman year. And he got me through by being tough on me, but being incredibly compassionate. And when I look back, when it was time to graduate, I didn't see anybody else that had been in a leadership position that impressed me the way he did. So I said, I want to be like him. And I told my family, and they went ballistic because this was, the young people are too young to even know this, but this was the Vietnam era, and the life expectancy of an infantry officer in the Marine Corps was expressed in days or weeks, and they were not happy that I was going to be a Marine. And so, but I wanted to be like Major Love, so I said I was going to be a Marine. And when I went to the Naval Academy from C.A. Johnson, two things I was not going to do. I'm like you. I know I'm tired too. So that's okay. I was not going to be a Marine because I thought they were crazy, and I was not going to fly airplanes because that was inherently dangerous. And I ended up in airplanes because I found out I didn't like crawling around in the mud.
Well, that's fair.
That was it.
So, all right. Well, by the way, the Marines are a subset of the Navy.
Yeah, we're the men's department.
I told that to someone, and they said, you can't say that anymore because there's a lot of WMs out there.
I know. It's a bad joke.
But it's the old joke that every time I say that, a Marine comes back with that line. So I just threw that one out for you,
I think you were
Charlie.
set up, Charlie.
Yeah, I threw you that softball there. All right, for you, our clock kind of stopped, but I think we still have time before we go to questions. I want both of you guys, with the rise of what's happening with space, international companies, private companies, what do you think's changed since your time in office, and you're still at NASA, but things that are happening at NASA? Both your perspective on that.
Well, actually, I just retired in August.
Well,
from
congratulations.
NASA, so I'm on the other side now. I think this whole notion of private space, Elon Musk with SpaceX and Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin and Rocket Lab and these other companies are really revolutionizing the business model of space. A lot of it's not necessarily new technology.
Right.
The flyback boosters that SpaceX does, they're companies that did that 15 years ago. It wasn't economical at the time, but they're shrewd business people, so they figured out how to do it. The big thing is, for us launching payloads, the cost of access to space has come down by a factor of 10.
Yeah.
It went from $10,000 a kilogram to about $1,000 a kilogram. And that's going to keep coming down the more flights you have. So I think that opens up a lot for space. It's what makes things like the Starlink and a lot of the things we're doing more affordable. But for me, again, going back to that kid who read science fiction, that was what in the 60s and 70s, a lot of science fiction writers expected to happen right after Apollo. There was this expectation that you'd have people who were private interest that would start flying people commercially, and we would have this whole space endeavor as just part of our economy.
Right.
And as I was frustrated by that not happening fast enough, I'm really encouraged that that's happening. I love the private space flight. I think eventually we'll have affordable space flight where you can get a ticket like you can get on an airplane.
Yeah.
Now, that day is not here yet, and I may not live to see that day, but it is a lot closer now than it was 10 years ago. So I think it's great. But I also want to emphasize that it's not all privately funded. I mean, NASA and the Defense Department spend a lot of money with SpaceX and Blue Origin to launch payloads. They're paid well for what they do, and they deserve it. They're doing great stuff. So I'm optimistic. I think it's a very positive turn.
Good. Any rebuttals?
No. Les says exactly what I would say. The big difference is how we procure the vehicles that we fly on. You know, that whether we're sending people or cargo, NASA has never built a big rocket, contrary to people's belief. Even back in the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo days, we helped the industry design the rocket and then build it for us, and we bought it. And we owned and operated it. And that's where the expense comes in, in owning and operating and in maintaining. And during the shuttle era, we discovered that, man, if we start hiring contractors who know these vehicles and let them run them for us, we can get some stuff done. So we actually started in shuttle with this public-private partnership. And then when I became the NASA administrator, we decided, why go halfway? Let's just get out of the rocket business entirely. Let's not own anything, and let's not try to operate it. We will buy a service. So the big difference between then and now is NASA purchases a service. Take a human to the International Space Station.
Right.
Take 50,000 tons of cargo to the moon or something like that. So it's just the way we get the launch vehicle and the vehicles that are going to carry people and how we maintain them and operate them. When we get to where we're going, like when we send a crew to the International Space Station, SpaceX launches the vehicle, gets it within a cone or a circle, a bubble of the International Space Station, and then we take over and we control the vehicle and crew until it's time for them to go home 6 months later. And then we tell SpaceX, okay, you can have your vehicle back. We put the crew in it, they undock, come back to Earth, it's theirs. We're done as soon as they undock, and that's the best way to operate. And I think it's a great model. What we don't know, what we didn't think about, and I think I'm still thinking about it, is because it is industry now, which operates on a profit motive.
Profit-based, yeah.
whereas government doesn't do that. We don't have a bottom line, unfortunately, in the government. So industry has to make a profit. We've got to figure out how do we put them in as a member of the team such that they understand that there are certain things they cannot do. They cannot not provide the service that we need for them to do. And that has come up on a number of occasions where a company says, well, we're not going to do this, and you say, no. We've got to come to an understanding. So that I for one didn't think about what we do when we started all this stuff, and so we're still trying to figure it out.
That is something I ran into when I left NASA to go to industry. They started talking about stuff, and I thought I knew what they were talking. They said, you need to be careful with your P&L. I'm like, well, payload, of course I know what that is, but turns out in industry they think that means something completely different. But you also had on one story I wanted to tell, to see if you knew, actually. In 2009, I was on my last space shuttle mission, and we had a call from President Obama. And he's talking to us, hey, how are you doing? I said, well, we just went over Chicago. And he said, oh, how's my yard? I said, well, it looked good from where we were. And then I said, by the way, Mr. President, have you selected a new administrator yet? And he said, well, no, I can't really talk about that. We're working on it. And then I said, well, can you tell me if it's anybody on the crew on the flight deck here? And he said, well, no, I can't talk about that. But basically, I got the idea that it was not any of us, and I was so thrilled it turned out to be you. So congratulations.
Very good.
All right. Well, I think we're at the point now where we'd like to get some questions from the audience. There are folks with microphones out there. So if you put your hand up, I'll point at you. Yes, sir, the gentleman right there in the middle.
For years, the question was, will we militarize or should we militarize space? That question has been answered because space is militarized. But do you think we're going to see warfare in the next 2 or 3 decades actually in space?
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
I mean, it requires work. And I always give my last flight as an example of how you can do things. My last space shuttle mission was the first joint Russian-American mission where we brought about 200 Russian crew members, trainers, medical personnel, and everything over from Moscow to Houston, Texas, and with their families. And so they lived and worked in Houston for a year prior to our flight, and then some of them stayed around for 6 months to a year after that. We sent a light crew to Moscow, to Star City, to live and work with the Russians and train. Here we are 25, 30 years later, and we still operate that way, and we get along, and one of my best friends now runs human spaceflight for the Russian Space Agency, and we do it because we have a common mission and common goals, and we talk a lot. Every family has differences, so.
Just to add to that, I think most of the countries you might think we have war with in space, they, like us, have too much to lose. Yeah. Because space, the satellites are pretty much mostly unprotected. There are a lot of them. It's a fragile environment. And if you start taking those out, it affects economies dramatically. You may not realize it, but our economy depends on space right now for a lot of reasons. It's almost $1 trillion a year economic sphere right now for communications, Earth observation, banking, you name it, a lot of stuff happens. The concern I have are the countries that have access to space that are not global powers that might just want to do mayhem. Yeah. And that's the concern I have, more so than a potential war with one of our peer or near peer adversaries. Yeah.
Quick note for those of you who aren't paying attention or don't pay attention to any of that stuff. I know you do. I got it. I do, and I appreciate that. For those of you who may not know, the Chinese right now are trying to figure out how do we get our crew home. Yeah. They have three astronauts. Yeah. They call them something else.
Iconauts.
Who are right now stranded on their space station Tiangong because of a strike from a piece of orbital debris. And they're trying to determine whether the vehicle is safe enough to bring them home. Sound familiar? So I am hopeful that we'll put our heads together, meaning the US and China and everybody else, and figure out how we get them home safely. Whether we use a SpaceX vehicle or what. We have the capability to do this if you talk to each other and
Right.
figure out how to do it. We started trying to do this way back in 2010, and people said, no, you can't do that. You can't collaborate. So.
We had a question over there.
How long do y'all be on y'all mission?
How long was an average mission?
Yeah.
So in our shuttle era, it was typically about 2 weeks. And then now, in the space station era, guys are going up there for 6 months as a nominal mission and coming home. I know one of the guys that I flew with on Rick Mastracchio flew with me on a station assembly mission right before people lived there full time. We were there for 2 weeks. And then he was on station when I visited his house, and I'm sitting there in his living room. His wife gets a call on the iPad, and Rick is there. I'm sitting in his easy chair with a drink and a remote control here. I'm like, hey, Rick, enjoy your time on the station. We're fine down here. Let's see. How about right there? Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is the first time I've been in a room with two astronauts at the same time, so thank you guys for being here.
Well, thank you.
One of my favorite authors and books was Tom Wolfe and The Right Stuff. How accurate was that then, and how accurate is it now?
You know, interestingly, we were talking about this in the back room. What Scooter and I went through is nothing at all like astronaut candidates go through today. It is much more involved. They go through a down selection to the final week of interviews and stuff. We did 1 week and it was done. Today we look at what are people going to be able to work together for 6 months. So a lot of psychological evaluations and stuff. We did, I think, an hour with a
I had an
shrink.
hour interview, yeah.
or something like that. It wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal, but we didn't know what a big deal it was when you're only going to be flying for a week or two. But when you're living together for 6 months, it's really critical. So,
I got done with that exam and talking to him, and I went home, went back to the hotel and called my mom and said, Mom, I just spent an hour with a psychologist and I still love you. So
I think the most important thing is the fact that, remember I told you that I didn't think I could be an astronaut because they were all military test pilots and all that kind of stuff. Today, you name it.
Yeah.
We are looking for people who provide some functional ability that we can use in space. Research is a lot of what we do, so lots of scientists, medical doctors, you name it. So the opportunity today is far more incredible for people from diverse walks of life to go to space than it was back then.
Okay, over there.
Where's my friend who was paying attention? Did you have a question? Who? I don't know. Back there. Okay.
All right, we'll get you next.
Why aren't you able to use water up in space?
Why or how?
I mean, we do
Why or
use
how?
water.
We have to, but I mean, why or how? What was the question? How? Okay. We drink water through a straw because although we have an astronaut who proved that you can drink from an open container, water doesn't behave. Everything abides by Newton's law that you all don't know, some of you don't know yet, but it says a body at rest stays at rest unless otherwise acted upon by an outside force. I can open my food container, and as long as I don't bump it, the food stays there, and I can eat with a fork, knife, spoon, just like I do down here. Water does not behave because water has this thing called surface tension that it abides by surface tension, and it'll float right up. It'll grab onto the side of the glass, and it'll drift up and drift out, and you'll have bubbles all over the place. So we put a straw in a container, like you do. What's the drink you all like? Well, whatever it is with the straw. Not bourbon.
Hey, if I can add something to the water, go ahead.
No, and then as you finish drinking, it has a little clip on it, and you clip it so that it doesn't come up out of the straw, and then you just, you take your hand off, and your water container just sits right there in midair until you're ready to drink it again. Yeah.
One of the things you may not know is that on the space station, the water recycling was developed where I work at the Marshall Space Flight Center.
Yep.
And they recycle 98% of the water. And if you think about where they get the water from that they recycle, it's pretty interesting on how complex that system is and how hard they have to work to do that recycling. And the joke that I've heard several astronauts say, and I don't know if y'all use this, is, today's coffee will be tomorrow's coffee. So do with it as you will. So
You're the girl down front.
How big are stars and what do they feel like?
Stars? Ooh, they're massive. Stars are massive, and I'm going to let Les explain the real stuff. But the point out, being in space, stars are the same size as they are here on Earth because they're so far away. The difference is that because we're not looking through the atmosphere that causes light to scatter and stuff, they're incredibly brilliant. I mean, they're just unbelievably brilliant, shining objects. Stars, planets, almost anything that has the sunlight reflecting off of it is just gorgeous. But they're no bigger, to your eye, even though you're in space.
Well, just to give you an example, you know how big the Earth is, right? It's big. You've traveled in cars going long distances. You could put 105 Earths across the sun, across its equator. And if you look at the sun as a big spherical container, a big ball, you could put 1 million Earths in our sun, okay? And it is so far away and so huge, it's a distance I can't even imagine. It's 93 million miles away, and it's still as big as a quarter when you look at it here. It gives you an idea. And if you look out in the universe beyond our sun, at other stars, our sun is on the small side of average. So there are many, many stars that you could put many times our sun in those stars for their size. So, I mean, space is big. Really big.
To me, flying 2 Hubble missions, that's what I learned from that. Hubble takes this images that have been traveling for billions of years, the light, and brings it to us. It's like a time machine. So the 2 things I learned is space is really big.
Really big.
So is there intelligence out there? Probably, because it's so big. But at the same time, the universe is really big. They could be really, really far away, and we have no way to get there. So,
just one fun fact. When you go out and look at the stars at night, that light that comes from those stars could have traveled for thousands of years, and it touches you when it goes into your eye.
Right.
So this particle of light has been traveling for thousands of years, and when you see it, you're touching that star out there in the universe somewhere.
So many years ago.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. You guys want to pick one?
Right there.
The young lady right there with her hand up. Yep.
Well, that's what he said.
Okay.
Has there ever been an animal in Earth?
In space?
Yeah.
Tons.
Oh yeah.
We've since the very early days of space flight before people, as a matter of fact. We used to fly monkeys, dogs.
Laika was the first mammal. Was a dog that the Russians flew. It was really funny. A story in Huntsville where the rockets were built. They had Abel and Baker, the little monkeys that flew in space and came back and survived. But what was really morbid is they had them stuffed and on display in the Space Museum. And since that time, they've taken them off display and they put them in the ground and they buried them, and it's okay.
It could be a precedent for what happens to astronauts if we on display.
Just as we do down here on Earth, animals play a critical role in research for us in terms of fighting diseases and the like. We've always used animals that have characteristics, biological characteristics, sort of like humans, so that we can develop drugs or other kinds of countermeasures for people. So they play a critically important role in the research we do.
All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone's attention and the discussion. Les and Charlie, thank you so much. Thank you.
Happy birthday to the Marines!
Oh, yeah, go Marines.
Does it work? Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Just a few thank yous to close down the session. I'd like to thank all of the teachers and students from Meminger Elementary School for being here with us today. Meminger is where my son Hugo goes to school, so I have a particular connection, but we loved all your questions, so thank you for being with us, and thanks to Ted and Elizabeth Dintersmith and the Good Neighbour Fund for helping us support field trips to the festival. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Charleston Literary Festival Board Chair Walter Federowitz, who is actually the brainchild behind this particular panel. Thank you, Walter. And then I'd like to thank again the sponsors of this session, Nicole Rubin and the incredible Mary Thornley, who introduced the session this morning. Thank you, Mary. And of course, Sarah Beardsey and Christopher Randolph. A story about Sarah. I said, Sarah, we have these two incredible people coming to the Literary Festival this year, actual rocket scientists. I was like, who am I going to find to interview the rocket scientists? And she said, my brother's an astronaut. So, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, Scooter, for allowing us to convince you to come and for sharing this wonderful conversation today. And finally, huge, huge thanks. What an honour, Les Johnson, and what an honour, Mr. Charlie Bolden, to have you here with us. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your knowledge.
All right.
So you all know the drill by now. Les Johnson and Mr. Charlie Bolden will be signing copies of their books in the back signing lounge. Please exit through the back, and thank you so much for being with us.
Yay! Great job.